Hey there all you cats and kittens, this is Kaylee from Bio 476. Today we're going to go over the lab assignment 2 material. The first thing to go over is the bones. So I made up a little song. It goes like this. So it goes, humerus, shoulder to elbow. Thumb side is the radius, ulna is medial. So just remember that in anatomical position, thumb is out, pinky is medial. And so the ulna is on the medial side and the radius is on the lateral side. And then the humerus is the single bone that connects the shoulder to the elbow. Next in the bones we have the 8 carpals. So they go scaphoid, lunate, trichotrum, pisiform, trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate. And I made up a little mnemonic. It's so long to PSU, ta-ta, class homework. Next we have the 5 metacarpals, and so each of the digits has its own metacarpal, and it goes from the carpals, which are the bones in the hand, to each of the fingers. So they make up the palm bones. And then next we have the phalanges. So each finger has 3 phalanges, except for the thumb, which only has 2. So you have proximal, intermediate, and distal, but on the thumb you only have proximal and distal phalanges. Alright, next we have the muscles. In the forearm, so we have both flexors, which are on the front of the forearm. Just remember, FFF, flexors on the front of the forearm. So you have both deep and superficial flexors. So for the deep flexors, we have the flexor pollicis longus. So the flexor pollicis longus, remember pollicis means thumb, so it's on this side and it runs in the deep section along the radius, flexor pollicis longus, so it flexes the thumb. Then next we have flexor digitorum profundus. So what do we know about the name? Flexor, so it flexes, the digitorum, so the digits are fingers, and it's profundus, so it's deep, it's very deep. And that runs along the ulna side. Next we have some superficial flexors. First we have the flexor digitorum superficialis. We just talked about the flexor digitorum profundus, which runs along the ulna side. Now we have the flexor digitorum superficialis, which also flexes the wrist and digits 2 through 5. And it goes from the forearm to the intermediate phalanges, which are the middle ones of digits 2 through 5. And then starting from medial to lateral, we have the 4 most superficial muscles of the front of the forearm, which are the flexor carpi ulnaris, which runs along the ulna. Then we have the palmaris longus, which is the one that we said we didn't really need, right? And then, which we can use for like tendon surgeries where we need an extra tendon. And then we have flexor carpi radialis, so that runs more along the radius, right? As we can tell by the name. And it flexes the carpi, so it flexes the wrist. So it extends from the elbow to the carpals in the hand, and it flexes the wrist. And last we have the pronator teres, and what do we know that it does according to its name? It pronates the arm. So you have your cup of soup and you pour it out. So you have supination and pronation. Alright, so you know what the pronator teres does. So it attaches here and it goes right up here. So when you flex that muscle, it turns your hand over to pronate it. And then we have our extensors, which are on the back of the forearm. So remember, flexion folds the wrist, and extension sends it backwards. So first we have our brachioradialis, which is kind of different. It actually flexes the elbow, so that attaches onto the humerus, and then it goes over to the radius over on this side, and so it ends up flexing the elbow, even though it's in the posterior compartment. Next, we have the extensor carpi ulnaris, and that goes from the forearm to the metacarpals. And the metacarpals are the ones that make up the palm, remember? And then its action is to extend and adduct the wrist. And adduct the wrist. And then we have extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis. So what do we know about what they do? They extend the wrist, right? And we can tell that by the name. And they attach to the carpals, and they run along the radial side, right? And so what else can we know about them? They're probably, if they're on the radial side and they act in the radial area, then they are probably innervated by the radial nerve and the recurrent radial artery and vein. Next we have the extensor digitorum. So that is attached to the back of the interosseous membrane. And then what does it do? It extends the wrist and extends digits 2 through 5 because it's called extensor digitorum. And next we have extensor pollicis longus. So what do we know about the name? Extensor, it extends. What is the pollicis? The thumb. It extends the thumb, and it's a long muscle. So that attaches to digit 1. And remember, it extends the wrist and flexes digit 1 and extends digit 1. Alright, next we have our hand muscles. So we have 3 hypothenar muscles which go to the pinky, and they're innervated by the ulnar nerve, because remember, the ulna runs along the pinky side of the forearm. The 3 of those are the opponens digiti minimi, which opposes the pinky finger, also known as the digiti minimi. And it's not very strong. It only does slight opposition. Next we have the abductor digiti minimi. So what do we know about the name? It abducts the digiti minimi, the small the pinky finger. So it abducts it. And then we have flexor digiti minimi brevis. So it's a short muscle. It flexes the pinky at the metacarpal phalangeal joint. And then we have the thenar muscles. So there's also 3 thenar muscles, and thenar goes to the thumb, right? And they're innervated by the median nerve, which runs along the middle of the forearm. So you have the abductor pollicis brevis, which abducts the thumb, right? Then we have the opponens pollicis, which opposes the thumb. And then we have the flexor pollicis brevis, which flexes the metacarpal phalangeal joint of digit 1. And then lastly, we have the lumbricals and the interossei. So the lumbricals, there are ones to each of the digits 2, 3, 4, and 5. And they are either innervated by the median nerve, if they're digits 2 and 3, or they're innervated by the ulnar nerve, because remember, the ulna is on the pinky side, and the radial nerve is on this side, but the median nerve goes up through the palm of the hand. So they flex at the metacarpal phalangeal joint, and they extend, I don't know if you can see that, they extend at the interphalangeal joints. And then you have the interossei, which are innervated by the ulnar nerve. And the dorsal interossei, so the ones on the dorsal side of the hand, they abduct the hand. They abduct the digits. Whereas the palmar interossei adduct the digits. And lastly, we're going to go over the veins, arteries, and the nerves. So the arteries, we know, bring blood to the forearm. And so which arteries do we have? So we have the radial nerve, which runs along the radius. And then we have the ulnar nerve, which runs along the ulnar side. And then we have the common interosseous artery, which goes to the interosseous membrane that connects the radius and the ulna. In terms of veins, which take the blood flow away from the forearm, we have the cephalic, the basilic, and the median vein. So the cephalic runs down the radius, the thumb side, and it follows the radial artery path. Then we have the median vein, which follows the common interosseous artery, and it goes down the middle of the forearm. And then we have the basilic vein, which mirrors the ulnar artery, and it goes down the ulnar side of the arm. And then for nerves, we have quite a few nerves. So we have the musculocutaneous, which runs down the radius to the styloid process. Remember, all of our styloid processes of both the ulna and the radius are down in the wrist. So the musculocutaneous nerve runs down the radius to the styloid process of the radius, and it ends there. And then we have the radial nerve, and it's medial to the musculocutaneous nerve, but it starts medial at the shoulder, crosses laterally at the elbow, and then it comes back and runs down the radius, but it ends up medial to the musculocutaneous nerve. And then we have the median nerve, which runs between the radius and the ulna to digits 1 to half of digit 4. And digit 4 is shared between the median and the ulnar nerve. So the ulnar nerve runs through the cubital tunnel in the medial side of your elbow, and it goes down the ulna to digits 4, half of digit 4, and digit 5, which is the digiti minimi. And when you hit your funny bone, you hit the ulnar nerve in your cubital tunnel. And next we have the axillary nerve, which just goes to the shoulder, and that's from the posterior cord. So lastly, what we're going to do is we're going to run through the brachial plexus. Now I kind of drew it up a little bit, but we're going to go through what each vertebrae goes through and where it ends up and which nerve it innervates. So we're going to start with C5. So C5 is going to join C6 at the upper trunk, and then it's going to continue. It's going to go down to axillary and radial nerves. I guess I can show you. But it's going to also continue through that lateral cord to the lateral pectoral muscle, the musculocutaneous nerve, and the median nerve. So C5 goes to the musculocutaneous nerve, the median nerve, the axillary, and the radial nerve. And C6 follows a similar path. Comes here, goes through the upper trunk, goes down into the radial and axillary nerves, and continues through the lateral cord and goes to the median, musculocutaneous, and lateral pectoral nerves. You can see that a little better. Next, we're gonna do C7. Remember that the nerves are always above the vertebrae that they are named after. So C7 is gonna continue through the middle trunk. It's gonna go up into the lateral cord and go to the lateral pectoral, musculocutaneous, and median nerve. But it's also going to continue through the posterior cord and go to axillary to the radial nerve. Because remember, the axillary nerve is only innervated by C5 and C6, which come from the upper trunk. And then next we have C8. Remember, C8 is the weird nerve off of the spine, because we don't actually have a C8 vertebrae. We only have 7 cervical vertebrae, but there is a nerve above the first thoracic vertebrae, and we call that one C8. So C8 starts here, it joins the lower trunk, it continues through the medial cord to the ulnar, the medial pectoral, medial cutaneous of the arm and the forearm. It also travels up to the median nerve, and it also travels up to join the posterior cord to innervate the radial nerve. See, there it is in orange. And then lastly, we have T1 nerve, which starts in the lower trunk and continues, and it goes to the medial pectoral, which is a motor nerve. It goes to medial cutaneous of the forearm and the arm, which are sensory only nerves. It continues to the ulnar nerve, goes up to the median nerve, and it also goes up to the radial nerve. And so here we have a full brachial plexus view. All right, thank you very much for hanging in there with me to learn Lab Assignment 2's terminology and material. Thanks and have a good night.